Hey, it's Zebra. With the release of Sunbreak imminent, I wanted to take some time to talk about some of the changes that Lance has received in the demo compared to the base game, and what that could mean for the playstyle of Lance moving forward. First, I'd like to start off with a bit of a retrospective on Lance and base rise. So, I wasn't the biggest fan of the optimal playstyle of Lance from a DPS perspective, echoing a lot of the same sentiments that others felt about the reliance on spiral thrust for damage, about it feeling awkward, out of place, and overall running counter to the core tenets of Lance as a weapon. It basically wasn't what a lot of people were looking for in Lance as a playstyle, and I totally understand, despite being a pretty big fan of Striker Lance in GU. That isn't to say that Spiral Thrust was all bad. Personally, I love some of the openings that can be exploited with a well-timed Silkbind, but being completely reliant on it for damage led to a game of maximizing Spiral Thrusts per minute, and I wasn't really stoked about playing that. This is where the Sunbreak changes come in. So Lance's core moveset has received buffs to lessen the overall reliance on Spiral Thrust as a whole. In particular, Instablock has become much more generous with its counter cross sweep, at least in the demo, being strong enough such that the optimal use of the counter isn't just to hop out of the guard and fire a Spiral Thrust. You would see that a lot in speedruns and base rise with Lance, and it honestly looked really silly. The counterattack actually does pretty good damage on its own now, so it's pretty fun to use it a lot, since the payoff is actually worth it now. As for Anchor Rage, it was changed so that the guard skill doesn't reduce the buff strength, thanks Capcom. That literally made no sense in base rise. And its overall duration was significantly increased, so it lasts 20 seconds now, so it's a more attractive option. DPS wise, Anchor Rage as an individual move isn't as strong as Cross Sweep or Spiral Thrust for punishing the monster, but the damage buff uptime from Anchor Rage is probably going to be an important consideration for a lot of matchups in the future. And that actually brings us to Skill Swap. So with the skill swap system, we have access to other Silkbinds while also being able to have Anchor Rage available for the damage buff. And I think it's pretty likely that we're going to be using Anchor Rage in combination with Skyward Thrust or Spiral Thrust against most monsters just because of the damage buff uptime. Or at least I'd hope that's the case, since it leads to a lot of interesting gameplay. Most of my playtime in the demo has been spent fighting Malzeno and learning the ins and outs of that fight with Lance. And there are a lot of interesting moments where you can use a combination of Spiral Thrust and Anchor Rage to punish some of his moves. We'll use Malzeno's base state as an example. After the triple ball attack, he always follows it up with a tail stab, and after a tail stab, he always follows it up with a wing stab. If you time it right, you can actually use Spiral Thrust to gap close during the triple ball attack, switch to Anchor Rage to punish the tail stab and get the yellow buff, and then switch back to Spiral Thrust to counter the wing stab, which not only gives you the buff from Spiral Thrust, but does some pretty huge damage. And the buff from Spiral Thrust actually stacks with the buff from Anchor Rage, so all your attacks are going to be doing even more damage after this combo, and you don't even have to switch back immediately to Anchor Rage. You can just stay on Spiral Thrust and use it again, and your Anchor Rage is still going to be active because it lasts 20 seconds. This kind of extended combo punish really rewards player knowledge of the matchup, and it's really satisfying to pull off, and I'd love to see more of it in the game. It does feel a bit spammy with the Silkbind still, given how many wire bugs you're using in such a short period of time, but I'm confident that it won't feel as over-centralizing as Spiral Thrust, and it'll at least feel more satisfying since it's way more controlled than just firing Spiral Thrust and praying, honestly. There are also moments where you can switch temporarily to Skyward Thrust to punish an aerial move from Astalos or Malzeno, and there are probably going to be more situations where that comes up as well. That's all I really have to say about Lance and Sunbreak for now. There are more changes to Lance in the demo that I haven't covered, but I think the main takeaways are the new Silkbinds and switch skills, and how the skill swap system could be used to its full potential with Lance. When it was first revealed, I was pretty skeptical about it being useful at all for Lance, just because the existing Silkbinds and switch skills weren't very competitive with each other, but now that I've played the demo more, I'm definitely optimistic about how it's going to play out in the full game. Plus, we're not stuck with Twinvine anymore. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next year.